Chapter 1201. As opposed to returning to their rooms, everyone gathered together in Tang Wulin's room. How could you keep such a huge secret from us, boss? That was way too dishonest of you. She accused in an enraged manner. Tang Wulin chuckled. I wanted to give all of you a surprise. Besides, what if I had told you during your trip here, and you all lost control of your emotions in public? You would have attracted way too much attention. I'm also just as stunned as every one of you. When His Majesty, the amorous Douluo, told me that I was the new Tang sect master, I was shocked beyond belief. We're not actually all that surprised about that. Yuan and Yui said, you're the captain of our Shrek 7 monsters, so the position of Sea God's Pavilion Master would have inevitably fallen to you. It was only a matter of time. If no one else had survived, then you'd already be the Sea God's Pavilion Master by default. As for the Tang sect master, we don't think that's too far-fetched, either. A wry smile appeared on Tang Wulin's face. The responsibilities on our shoulders have become even heavier. Elder Long said that we'll have to travel to the Douluo Empire and Dou Spirit Empire next. With that as an introduction, Tang Wulin gave everyone a brief recount of the plan. Shishi wore a sly smile on his face as he said, it's fantastic news that all of them are going to be sent to the demonic island. Hee. Yuan and Yui rolled her eyes at him in response. Tang Wulin said, I hope everyone can improve through those hardships. There's finally hope for our Shrek Academy now, but it's still going to be very difficult for us to rebuild the academy. We have enormous support from the Tang sect in terms of money and resources, but we can only rely on ourselves to unite more people to our cause. The Tang sect headquarters also suffered severe losses during the bombing, and many powerful beings perished. At the same time, the Tang sect also has to focus on the other two continents, so they won't be able to lend sufficient powerful beings to our cause. We can only rely on ourselves, so during the 3 months we have before we set off for those two continents, we have to at least complete most of our suits of 3-word battle armor. We also have some time on the ship, and that should be enough for us to finalize everything if we're not already finished by then. Xinglin, Yuanen, how are your mecha making skills progressing? Yi Xinglin nodded in response. Both Yuanen and I are 7th rank mecha makers, so we shouldn't have any issues. Yuanen is slightly more skilled than me and is close to reaching the 8th rank. Tang Wulin instantly heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing this. All right, then we'll prepare to begin constructing our suits of battle armor right away. Yuanen, Xinglin, I'll forge all of the metals required for your suits of 3-word battle armor first so you can construct them as early as possible. Then help everyone else with their battle armor construction. After attaining their suits of 3-word battle armor, it would naturally become easier for them to help construct everyone else's suits of battle armor. Among the 7 of them, their powers were ranked just below Tang Wulin anyway. Yuan and Yui and Yi Xinglin both nodded in unison. Boss, it's been so long since we last sparred. How about we have a match to assess everyone's progress before we begin constructing our suits of battle armor? You'll be even more aware of everyone's needs. Then, Shishi suggested in an eager manner. Yui's Hang Yu immediately chimed in. I agree. You guys wouldn't know this yet, but Boss is currently ridiculously powerful. Even Teacher Wu is no match for him anyway, and even Elder Long was forced back a half step by him during a sparring match. I think even the 6 of us together may not be a match for him. Tang Wulin's expression immediately darkened upon hearing this. Elder Long clearly went easy on me. Yui's Hang Yu shrugged in response. I only believe what I see with my own eyes. In any case, there's no way I would have survived that attack. Hence, if we want to have a sparring match, I strongly suggest a 6-on-1 match. Otherwise, we have no chance at all. Shishi thought about this for a moment before turning to Tang Wulin with a snide look in his eyes. I think that's a good idea. With Boss's physical constitution, there's no way we'll be able to hurt him anyway. You two seem to be enjoying this a lot. Tang Wulin snapped. We certainly are. So how about it? Are you scared, boss? Yui's Hang Yu goaded. Yuan and Yui and Yi Xinglin remained silent, but there was amusement shimmering in their eyes, and Xu Shaoan also looked very eager for a 6-on-1 match. I refuse to do 1-on-6. At least give me 2 people. Tang Wulin tried to negotiate some more favorable terms for himself. We'll have no chance in a 3-on-4 battle. No way. It has to be 1-on-6. Yui's Hang Yu and Shishi were suddenly completely on the same page here. Is no one willing to fight with me? Tang Wulin asked in a resigned manner. Yi Xinglin suggested, how about this, Captain? You can get Sima Jinkai to come and help you. Tang Wulin's heart stirred slightly upon hearing this, but he still refused. There's no way I can win even in a 2-on-6 battle. From Yui's Hang Yu's holy fusion technique, it was quite apparent that all of his friends had been progressing rapidly. Yi Xinglin had to have attained a better understanding of her sword soul, and with Yuan and Yui's divine cloud vortex fists and fallen angel martial soul, she was definitely no less powerful than Yi Xinglin. Furthermore, he still didn't know what Shishi's spatial ability was all about. Xu Shaoan had a mysterious smile on her face that was very unsettling to him, and Shu Lizzie had even admitted himself that his combat prowess was different from in the past. The 6 of them combined would surely present an extremely powerful force. This isn't like you, boss. When did you become such a coward? Shishi continued to go Tang Wulin. However, Tang Wulin wasn't falling for it. I'm not being a coward, it's just that I've already fused all of the metals required for my suit of 3-word battle armor, so I can't use it before it's completed. Unless you all promise not to use your suits of battle armor, I won't be a match for you even with Sima Jinkai on my side. With your suits of 2-word battle armor, all of you are comparable in power to title Douluo. This is simply too unfair, and it won't be fun for you guys, either. Then what do you suggest? Yui's Hang Yu asked. Tang Wulin replied, how about this? Strength King Arahang is also here. I'll fight with those 2 against the 6 of you. How about that? Arahang? Everyone was rather taken aback to hear this. This was Tang Wulin's senior disciple brother at the body sect, and due to the fact that all of them had followed Tang Wulin's matches, they had all seen Arahang in action, so they were well aware of how powerful he was. However, they were still confident in their chances in a 3-on-6 battle. Let's settle on that, Yuan and Yui decided. All of them wanted to defeat Tang Wulin, but there was no point in defeating him in an extremely lopsided affair. Tang Wulin nodded in response. All right, I'll bring them over here. The Blood Dragon squad was situated in their original hotel. After all, aside from Arahang and Sima Jinkai, all of them belonged to the Blood God Legion. No matter how independent the Blood God Legion was, it was still a military organization, and the underground world of the Tang sect was far too important a secret to be revealed to them. As such, even though Tang Wulin had great trust in his comrades, he wasn't going to bring them here. However, Arahang was Tang Wulin's senior disciple brother, and Sima Jinkai was now referring to him as master, so there wouldn't be any issues with bringing them here. Tang Wulin had been cultivating with them this entire time anyway. Thus, after securing permission from Zhang Xin, Tang Wulin traveled to the hotel to find the 2 of them. As soon as Tang Wulin left, Shishi turned to his friends in an eager manner and said, all right, brothers and sisters, shall we formulate a plan to deal with Boss and the others? Chapter 1202. After arriving at Heaven Dou City, the main mission of the Blood Dragon squad was to collect all types of information and familiarize themselves with everything in Heaven Dou City. They had lived their entire lives in the Blood God Legion, so they weren't familiar with the outside world at all. Heaven Dou City and Bright City, the latter of which they had just visited, were both large cities with vastly contrasting styles, so familiarizing themselves with those 2 cities would make it a lot easier for them to integrate themselves into society. Before Tang Wulin had even met Arahang and Sima Jinkai, he bumped into his vice captain first. I barely even see you nowadays. What have you been up to? Long Yakshu asked in a befuddled manner. Ever since Tang Wulin had entered the Sea God's Lake with that woman with the black cat martial soul true body, he had become very mysterious, and even his emotional fluctuations had become very violent. Long Yakshu very rarely even saw him anymore, and now that they had bumped into one another, she was naturally going to inquire about the reasons behind this. Tang Wulin replied, I've been juggling quite a few things recently. I've formulated a plan for how to proceed, and I was going to find you to discuss these plans anyway. I've already contacted the Tang sect, and I might be traveling to the Douluo continent and Dou Spirit continent with people from the Tang sect in 3 months. I'll be going there to assess the situation and also keep tabs on the imminent war. You're going to the Douluo Empire. Why? Long Yakshu was stunned. The war is going to start in a year at most. If you get caught traveling on the other 2 continents at that time, you're very likely going to be branded as a traitor to the Federation. Besides, it's not safe, either. You've seen how powerful the Federation's soul weapons are. What if you get caught up in the war there? Tang Wulin replied, I'm going there for the specific purpose of preventing this war from happening. If a war were to erupt, how many people would die? Regardless of which continent they live on, they're all humans. Long Yakshu shook her head in a stern manner. I won't agree to this. It's too dangerous. What are you going to do when you get there anyway? Do you think you can sway the situation on your own? Even the Tang sect won't be able to accomplish this. Tang Wulin fell silent for a moment before deciding against telling her the entire truth. I recently received news that my missing parents could be on the Dou Spirit continent, so I have to go. Long Yakshu shuddered slightly upon hearing this, and she looked into Tang Wulin's determined eyes as she took a deep breath, then insisted, if you have to go, then take me with you. Tang Wolin asked, you're a federal soldier. Aren't you afraid that you'll encounter the problems you just outlined to me? I'm not afraid of anything. I'll go wherever you go. Our Blood Dragon squad was assembled to protect you in the first place. And don't forget that you're carrying the burden of opposing the entire abyssal plane. If something were to happen to you, what will we do when the next abyssal tide strikes? The reasons Long Yachu provided were very valid, and Tang Wolin was having a hard time trying to rebut them. All right, but there's still some time left, so it's too early to be discussing such things. I'll only be leaving in 3 months anyway. Long Yachu insisted. In any case, if you're going, then you have to take the Blood Dragon squad with you. You'll always have a need for some extra hands. Tang Wolin nodded in response. Long Yachu was right. The situation on the other 2 continents was completely unknown to him, and even though he had the Tangsect to back him up, which should theoretically result in a smooth trip, he did need some people who could perform various duties for him. In particular, the more people he had to help rescue his parents, the better. All right, I'll notify you if there are any changes to the plan. What? You failed? There was a middle-aged man with a head of black hair appraising their lord with a dark expression on his face. This middle-aged man had a golden streak down the middle of his black hair, and he had his hands clasped behind his back as he paced back and forth in an agitated manner. And you revealed your identity to them. Are you an idiot? A young man standing off to the side sneered. Shut up. Their lord glowered at the young man before explaining. I didn't know I was going to fail. I had thought that I was going to be killing those people anyway, so what did it matter if I told them my name? How could I have known that human technology has already developed to this extent? I don't know what that weapon is, but it's able to pierce through my outward defenses and detonate within my body. I was caught off guard and wounded by those weapons. Otherwise, I would have been able to kill them for sure. That's enough. The middle-aged man snapped in a cold manner. Who would have thought that Tang Wolin would develop this quickly? As expected of a man with the bloodline of the Golden Dragon King. We can't wait any longer. We have to get rid of him right away. Our lord still refuses to kill him on her own, so we'll have to do so in her stead. On top of that, we have to kill him before she finds out what we're doing. Only after he dies can our lord focus her entire attention on controlling and enslaving the entire human race to provide us with enough resources. When our lord transforms into the dragon god again, our soul beasts will enjoy our long-awaited resurgence. When that time comes, we'll no longer be bound by the laws of this world, and our lord will be able to create a new divine realm. No one was looking forward to this day more than he did, as he knew that no matter what he tried, there was no way that he would be able to survive his next heavenly tribulation. If this opportunity went taken, then this would be the end for him. Are you going after him in person, boss? Won't our lord notice what you're doing? The young man asked. I can't worry about things like that now. I can't give him any more chances. Don't tell Bai Ji and Ashi about what we're doing. The 3 of us will go together. I'll see just how many attacks this Tang Wolin can take from me. Their lord immediately burst into laughter. Boss will surely be able to crush him with a single attack. At the same time, he heaved an internal sigh of relief. Back when he had attacked Tang Wolin, he hadn't actually unleashed his full power. He wasn't actually as forthright as he looked, and he knew that if he were to kill Tang Wolin, he would definitely have to face the fury of their lord. He didn't want to be the scapegoat, and he didn't have to now. Regardless of whether their lord would want to kill Titine in an act of vengeance, she currently didn't possess the power to do so. And as for whether she would turn on him once she became powerful enough, that was something for him to worry about in the future. Where are we going to find him, though? The young man mused. Their lord and Titine both faltered in unison. Indeed, where was Tang Wolin right now? Titine replied in a cold voice. It won't be difficult to find him. He has the aura of the dragon god, so I'll be able to sense him as long as he's within a certain range. However, it's exactly because of that dragon god aura that I won't be able to kill him without suffering severe consequences. If I attack him directly, I'll receive backlash from his dragon god aura, so I'll clear away all of the obstacles while you 2 kill him in the shortest time possible. Their lord and the young man's expressions both changed slightly upon hearing this. So they were going to have to be the executioners anyway? They didn't want to accept this duty, but they had to admit that Titine's reasoning was quite valid. 3 on 6. Of course I'll come. I don't mind even if it's 3 on 60. Arahang chortled with glee. He was beyond excited to hear that a sparring match was being organized. 60? Why don't you take on all 6 of them on your own while we watch? Sima Jinkai sneered in a disdainful manner. Arahang countered. That won't do. It's not every day that I get a chance to fight alongside my junior disciple brother. He wasn't an idiot, and he knew that the other members of Shrek's 7 monsters definitely weren't going to be pushovers. In a 1-on-6 battle, he would have no chance at all. Tang Wolin cautioned. There's one thing that I have to tell you. Due to the disparity in cultivation ranks, we won't be allowed to use our suits of battle armor, but they can, so don't get complacent. Arahang and Sima Jinkai were already 3-word battle armor masters now, and it would simply be too unfair for Shrek's 6 monsters if they had access to the enhancements and domains provided to them by their suits of battle armor. After all, Arahang and Sima Jinkai were both titled Douluos, and they were very powerful titled Douluos who were most likely more powerful than even the average hyper Douluo. All right. Sima Jinkai nodded without any hesitation. He was full of confidence about his match. After fusing as one with the dragon-slaying saber, he had learned the truth about his past, and following the constant polishing provided by the golden dragon spear, the dragon-slaying saber was now even more powerful and self-contained. As a result, Sima Jinkai's cultivation was also progressing at a rapid rate. However, he knew that the dragon-slaying saber had only become this powerful due to the polishing effect of Tang Wolin's golden dragon spear. As such, he had to protect Tang Wolin with all his might. If something were to happen to Tang Wolin, he would experience severe problems as the law-enforcing saber of the dragon clan. He didn't know what the exact outcome of that would be, but whenever the thought sprang into his mind, he would be struck by a strong sense of fear. Chapter 1203. Hence, Sima Jinkai had already resigned himself to his fate. He would just have to follow Tang Wolin wherever he went. After arriving at the Tangsect's underground world, both Sima Jinkai and Arahang were also given a huge shock. The Tangsect has an amazing place like this. This is right under Heaven Dou City. How did the authorities not know anything about this? This is insane. If the Tangsect wanted to destroy a city, they would probably be able to do so even easier than Shrek City was destroyed. Arahang was truly stunned by this underground Tangsect world. Tang Wolin said in a serious voice, Senior disciple brother Sima, you have to keep everything about this underground world strictly confidential. This is the Tangsect's biggest secret. Oh, by the way, His Majesties, the amorous Douluo and Blood One have already passed down the position of Tangsect master to me. Sima Jinkai and Arahang couldn't help but exchange an astonished glance upon hearing this. They were both well aware of what this entailed. The fact that the Tangsect was able to become one of the 4 supporting pillars of the Blood God Legion was a testament to its status. Compared to the Spirit Pagoda, the Tangsect flew, more so under the radar, and its main source of income and expansion lay in its research and development, as well as production into soul tools. Compared to the Spirit Pagoda, the Tangsect had a longer history, and it had always shared an extremely close bond with Shrek Academy. However, at the same time, the Tangsect was more understated than the Spirit Pagoda, so no one knew just how powerful it was. Back when the Tangsect headquarters had been bombed, many people had thought that it was over for the Tangsect. In particular, the Tangsect had been constantly shrinking following the bombing, to the extent that it had almost disappeared from the public eye. But who could have imagined that the Tangsect would have an underground world like this? These ancient sects really couldn't be judged by normal standards. Their wealth and power was simply unimaginable. They all knew that Tang Wolin's objective for returning to Heaven Dou City was to revive Shrek Academy in the near future, but at the same time, they knew just how arduous an undertaking that was going to be. However, when they saw the unfathomable foundation that the Tangsect had retained coupled with the fact that Tang Wolin was now the Tangsect master, they were finally beginning to be convinced that everything Tang Wolin wanted to achieve didn't seem to be impossible after all. Tang Wolin had contacted his friends via cell communicator, asking them to wait on the drill ground, so he took Arahang and Sima Jinkai there directly. For everyone's safety, he invited the Light Dark Douluo and the Holy Spirit Douluo as referees and for supervision purposes. After all, at their levels of power, it wouldn't be that easy to hold back during their sparring matches, so they could easily hurt one another if they weren't careful. By the time they arrived at the drill ground, the Holy Spirit Douluo was already sitting with her eyes closed on a chair at the edge of the drill ground, and she seemed to be meditating. She was still as beautiful as ever, but Tang Wolin couldn't help but feel sad every time he saw her as he could no longer sense any vitality from her. She was dead on the inside. Elder Long had also arrived, and she was saying something to Shu Lizzie in a quiet voice. Shu Lizzie was listening in an extremely animated and focused manner, and his chubby cheeks were jiggling slightly with his excitement. Long Ye had accepted Shu Lizzie as her disciple following the Sea God Fate matchmaking convention and began to instruct him in his cultivation. However, the academy had been bombed not long after they had returned from the demonic island, so he didn't actually get a chance to learn from Elder Long for a very long time. Now that he was reunited with his teacher, Shu Shulisi was naturally in extremely high spirits. As soon as Sima Jinkai strode into the drill ground, he immediately sensed something, and he cast his gaze toward a certain direction to find a young woman appraising him while sitting on the ground with her legs crossed. Their eyes met, and Sima Jinkai clearly felt a faint hint of pain spear through his mind. At the same time, he also immediately identified this young woman. Wasn't she the swordswoman who had given him quite a tough fight during the Star Battle Net Inter Federation competition? Was she one of Shrek's 7 monsters as well? He had originally been very relaxed, just like Arahang, but a hint of wariness welled up in his heart at the sight of Yu Xinglan. Even though he had already reached the title Douluo level, he wasn't allowed to use his battle armor during this sparring match. During their last battle, that woman had already attained a sword soul, so she would have most definitely become more powerful since then, and would not be an easy opponent to face. If all of Shrek's 7 monsters were as powerful as her, then this 3-on-6 match wasn't going to be easy at all. Yue Sengyu, Yuan and Yui, Yu Xinglan, Xu Shaoan, and Shishi strode over to them, and Shu Lizzie also followed suit after excusing himself with Elder Long. Shishi was the first to arrive before them, and he looked up at the man mountain that was Arahang in a slightly awestruck manner. You really are massive, Strength King. You're far more intimidating in person than on television. Hee. Arahang chuckled as he flexed his monstrous right bicep to Shishi. Yu Xinglan's gaze had been fixed solely on Sima Jinkai this entire time. We meet again. Please enlighten me. Sima Jinkai replied. Looks like you've developed your sword soul quite well, lass. Unfortunately for you, the gap between us can't be bridged in such a short time. Yu Xinglan didn't say anything in response to this. Instead, she merely closed her eyes, and the sharp aura that she was releasing abruptly disappeared. Sima Jinkai's expressions changed slightly upon seeing this. She had learned to contain the aura of her sword. She was truly an exceptional prodigy. Everyone's here, so let's begin, Elder Long urged. Only then did Arahang and Sima Jinkai notice her, and both of them shuddered slightly as soon as they caught sight of her. Elder Long seemed to be the epitome of a frail and ordinary old woman, and there wasn't even a single trace of aura emanating from her body. In contrast, Arahang and Sima Jinkai were both titled Douluo, and they were quite powerful even among those of their cultivation rank. They couldn't sense Elder Long's aura, but they could sense that Elder Long was someone whom they had to look up to. This was an instinctive reaction. Elder Long was too ordinary, so much so that she didn't even seem to exist in their spiritual world, and it was exactly this that made her even more terrifying in their hearts. This was clearly an indication that her spiritual power far outstripped theirs. She most definitely possessed spirit domain realm spiritual power. Never did they think that such an unfathomably powerful being would exist in Shrek Academy or the Tang sect. Even without an introduction from Tang Wolin, Arahang and Sima Jinkai took the initiative to extend respectful bows toward Elder Long. We pay our respects to our esteemed senior. Long Ye replied. No need for formalities. Tang Wolin turned toward everyone. All of the participants in this sparring match were close friends of his, and the main objective of this first match was for everyone to familiarize themselves with one another's powers and abilities. Strictly speaking, Tang Wolin had actually lost in his match against Yue Sengyu. He had underestimated just how much Yue Sengyu had improved and refrained from unleashing his true power from the get-go, thereby giving Yue Sengyu the opportunity to destroy his blood soul fusion technique with his holy fusion technique. However, Tang Wolin certainly wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. His expression remained as calm as ever, but fierce battle intent was already raging within his heart. Through this sparring match, he wanted to see just how much his friends had grown. Everyone backed away to open up some distance, and like Dark Douluo, Long Ye abruptly vanished before reappearing beside the Holy Spirit Douluo. She waved her hand through the air, and the protective barrier was activated to encompass the entire drill ground. Not only that, but a layer of black and white light had appeared outside the protective barrier. This was Elder Long's power of light and darkness. Chapter 1204. Tang Wolin couldn't help but take an extra glance at the black and white light outside. He hadn't ever directly clashed with Elder Long's power of light and darkness, but after experiencing Elder Long's spiritual domain, he had been well and truly stunned. In a 3-on-6 match, it was quite apparent which side held the advantage in numbers, but in terms of individual powers, it was undoubtedly the case that Tang Wolin, Arahang, and Sima Jinkai held the clear upper hand. However, individual power could never decide the outcome of a battle. Tang Wolin knew that his friends definitely had far better teamwork and synergy than he had with Sima Jinkai and Arahang. The two sides were separated by 200 meters, and in terms of Soul Master configuration, Shrek 6 monsters was definitely more balanced. Yue Sengyu, Yu Xinglan, and Yuan and Yui were the assault system Soul Masters. Xu Shaoan was the control system Soul Master. Shishi was the agility attack system Soul Master, and Shu Lizzie was the food system Soul Master. In contrast, Tang Wolin's trio consisted entirely of assault system Soul Masters, with only Tang Wolin doubling as a control system Soul Master as well. Begin. Elder Long was just as direct and straightforward as ever and announced the commencement of the match without wasting any time with words. Tang Wolin was the first to spring into action. He stomped his left foot into the ground amid an earth-shattering boom, and his body shot forth like a golden arrow toward Shrek 6 monsters. Arahang and Sima Jinkai also charged forward on either side of him, and all three of them unleashed their martial souls in unison. 7 soul rings rose up around Tang Wolin's body with his greenish golden and orange golden soul ring the most eye-catching of the 7. All of his friends actually could have already attained orange golden soul rings as well, but because they had been separated for a year, they hadn't yet had a chance to absorb the plant system great beasts within Tang Wolin's body. Everyone also had different reasons for not coming to Tang Wolin for these 100,000-year-old soul spirits back when they had progressed to rank 70 in soul power. In order to attain the holy fusion technique, Yue Sengyu had to use his original angel soul spirit as his 7th soul ring. Yu Xinglan had reached a critical juncture in her sword soul breakthrough and couldn't afford to stop and absorb a plant system soul spirit, and she simply made a breakthrough on her own. Shishi's situation was similar to Yu Xinglan's. After reaching rank 70 in soul power, he could sense that his martial soul had mutated, and in order to successfully complete the mutation, he had to make his breakthrough right away as well. Shu Lizzie had originally intended to wait, but once he reached rank 70 in soul power, the soul spirit that he had already absorbed acted on its own to bestow upon him a 7th soul ring. Yuan and Yui had twin martial souls, and based on her own special circumstances, she had decided to hold off until she became soul Douluo before fusing with one of the plant system great beasts. Thus, the only one who could fuse with one of the plant system great beasts was Xu Shaoan. However, everyone else had made their breakthroughs, and after witnessing how hard Yue Sengyu had been working, she decided to travel to the stargazing platform and also completed her breakthrough there. At the time, she had thought that everyone was waiting until they became soul Douluos before they fused with the plant system great beasts, so she would do the same. Besides, the plant system great beast may not suit her anyway, so she decided to make a breakthrough on her own. As such, Tang Wolin still had the 6 great beasts, and he was also the only one present with an orange golden soul ring. Tang Wolin's trio rushed forward in a triangular formation, and Shrek 6 monsters had also adopted a formation that they had decided on in advance. Shishi stepped off to the side and vanished silently into thin air. Yuan and Yui was at the center with Yu Xinglan and Yue Sengyu on either side of her, while Xu Shaoan was behind her, and Shu Lizzie brought up the rear. All 6 of them were chewing on steamed buns, but they had intentionally kept their actions very discreet so Tang Wolin didn't even know which type of steamed bun they were eating. He could only assume that it was the bloodthirsty red bean bun. Aside from Shishi, who had disappeared, the other 5 simply remained standing on the spot, seemingly waiting for Tang Wolin and the others to reach them. Tang Wolin was accelerating further and further with his golden dragon wings spread open to make any directional adjustments that he would need, and his golden dragon spear had already appeared in his grasp. His aura was so overbearing that it was almost threatening to tear the very air apart. With his powers, the distance of 200 meters was covered virtually in the blink of an eye, and even though Arahang and Sima Jinkai were a step behind him, they certainly weren't any slower than him. Sima Jinkai brandished his dragon-slaying saber, and he was directly facing Yu Xinglan. Their eyes met, and he could see unmatched battle intent burning within her eyes. Sima Jinkai felt as if he were looking at his past self in Yu Xinglan, but in contrast with him, Yu Xinglan wasn't obsessed with battle. She was simply obsessed with her sword. What level had her sword soul reached? Even though they were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, Sima Jinkai was still feeling very confident. He knew just how powerful Tang Wolin currently was. In a one-on-one battle, even he wasn't a match for Tang Wolin unless he were to use his battle armor. One had to realize that he was quite exceptional even among titled Douluos, whereas Tang Wolin was only a 7 ring Soul Sage. The enhancements bestowed upon him by his Golden Dragon King powers were truly astounding. Arahang's thought process was much the same as Sima Jinkai's. He also didn't favor Shrek 6 monsters' chances. Under normal circumstances, a titled Douluo should be able to take on 7 ringed Soul Sages with ease. If it weren't for the fact that their opponents were going to be Shrek 6 monsters, he wouldn't even be interested in participating in this battle. A faint smile appeared on Tang Wulin's face. He was the only one among the 3 of them who wasn't convinced that this would be an easy victory, as he was far too familiar with the powers of his friends. All of them had grown and developed alongside one another. He had completely evolved during his year-long military stint, as had all of his friends. Hence, even though it appeared that he was charging full steam ahead, he was actually keeping some effort in reserve. Furthermore, his gaze wasn't focused on Yuan and Yui. Instead, his attention was directed toward Xu Xiaoan, who was standing behind her. He knew that the only person who could truly stop a full frontal assault from him was her. After Tang Wulin had covered over 100 meters, Xu Xiaoan's star finally lit up with starlight, and it seemed that she was about to release a soul seal. It was exactly because of how familiar Tang Wulin was with her powers that he chose to strike at this moment without any hesitation. 2 beams of purple light erupted from his eyes like lightning. Tang Wulin's purple demon eyes hadn't yet been cultivated to the final boundless level, but with his immense spiritual powers, even his current purple demon eyes were capable of unleashing an extremely terrifying spiritual attack. If he were targeting a normal soul sage, it wouldn't even be impossible for their head to explode from an attack like this. Tang Wulin knew that the most fearsome aspect of Xu Xiaoan's abilities was their absolute nature. This was why she was able to become one of Shrek's 7 monsters, so he definitely couldn't give her a chance to work her magic. The only option available to him was to cut her off before she could do anything. Thus, he released a spiritual attack from his purple demon eyes without any hesitation. This was a surprise attack that was fueled by his spirit domain realm spiritual power, so he was confident that Xu Xiaoan wouldn't be able to defend herself against it, even if she were wary of such an attack. After all, none of his friends were aware that he had reached the spirit domain realm. Purple light flashed, and even Sima Jinkai and Arahang couldn't help but shudder internally as they sensed the devastating spiritual power imbued within the 2 beams of light. Even they wouldn't be able to defend themselves against such a fearsome spiritual attack. They were able to sense how terrifying the attack was from the side, let alone Shrek 6 monsters, who were directly up ahead. During their sparring matches against Tang Wulin, both of them had suffered extensively in the face of his purple demon eyes. Tang Wulin had been focusing his efforts on cultivating his purple demon eyes recently, and one of the objectives he was trying to achieve was to reach the boundless level as quickly as possible. He was confident that once he reached that level, it would be easier for him to attain his own spiritual domain. However, the events that unfolded next were rather surprising to all 3 of them. As soon as Tang Wulin unleashed his purple demon eyes, Xu Xiaoan suddenly raised her head and gave him a peculiar smile. Tang Wulin's heart immediately tightened at the sight of this smile. Back when they had first entered Shrek Academy, Xu Xiaoan had secured a place in their class with her skills as a master actress. Hence, she definitely wasn't smiling for no reason now. Right at this moment, a golden light barrier appeared silently in front of Shrek 6 monsters, and Tang Wulin's purple demon eyes attack crashed directly into it. Chapter 1205. Theoretically speaking, energy barriers shouldn't have been able to block spiritual attacks, but Xu Xiaoan had achieved this. A layer of purple light spread over the barrier before proliferating outward, but Xu Xiaoan remained completely unaffected. At this point, Tang Wulin had also reached them, and his body flashed with golden light as his golden dragon spear struck the light barrier. In that instant, Tang Wulin suddenly felt as if his spear had pierced into space rather than a barrier. He felt as if his peerlessly sharp golden dragon spear had fallen upon nothing, and it was as if everything had abruptly vanished. His opponents also disappeared in that instant, and from everyone else's perspective, Tang Wulin's golden dragon spear had vanished into the light barrier, and his rapidly accelerating body quickly followed suit. What was happening? Right at this moment, Yuan and Yui, Yue's Hangyu, and Yu Xinglan sprang into action in unison. Yuan and Yui bent her knees to lower her center of gravity while slowly launching her right fist through the air. Countless streams of air instantly converged toward her fist before rapidly rotating to form a fearsome vortex that crashed directly toward Tang Wulin's chest. Yu Xinglan's body flashed, and she transformed into specks of starlight. Her peerless sword intent transformed into her sword soul, and she fused as one with her sword before charging straight toward Tang Wulin. Yue's Hangyu wasn't holding back either. The 12-winged angel projection immediately appeared behind him, following which his holy sword instantly fused as one with the angel, and he unleashed his holy angel descends and light of judgment in unison. Their attacks were all directed toward Tang Wulin, and they didn't even take so much as a single glance at Arahang and Sima Jinkai. It was also right at this moment that 2 halos silently appeared beneath Sima Jinkai and Arahang's feet. The halos had appeared far too abruptly for them to evade, and their rapidly advancing figures suddenly stopped cold before tipping forward from the momentum they had built up. A series of starlight chains then instantly bound their bodies, and even though it only took them a split second to struggle free from those chains, they were still struck by the 1-second absolute immobilization effect, and 1 second on a battlefield was enough to completely change everything. In just a single second, Shrek 6 monsters had unleashed a perfect combination attack against Tang Wulin. The golden light barrier had actually only stopped Tang Wulin for a second, but that 1 second delay had completely nullified his spiritual attack and full frontal assault. This was the terrifying power of Shrek 7 monsters, and in the blink of an eye, this had become a 6-on-1 battle. During the 1 second that they were immobilized, both Sima Jinkai and Arahang's expressions changed drastically. Never did they think that there would be such a powerful control system soulmaster among Shrek 7 monsters. Right at this moment, bright golden light erupted from Tang Wulin's body, and his golden scales suddenly took on a mirror-like quality while flashing rapidly. The first attack to strike him was the divine cloud vortex fists. A resounding boom rang out, and Tang Wulin's aura swelled drastically amid the eruption of golden light. This was his golden dragon tyrant body. In the instant that Tang Wulin's spiritual attack had failed to take effect, he had immediately released this soul skill. He didn't dare to wait as he was facing his friends in their most powerful form. A faint smile appeared on Tang Wulin's face, and he remained calm and collected despite being surrounded. The power of the divine cloud vortex fists lay not in its offensive prowess, but also in its control. Despite being struck by such a heavy punch, not only was Tang Wulin not sent flying, he seemed to have been stuck to the fist, and his entire body faltered in midair. The light of judgment was the next to arrive, and it struck Tang Wulin's body with ferocious might. Light was always going to be faster than Yu Xinglan's star god sword. Tang Wulin waved his right hand through the air, and dazzling golden light radiated forth as a layer of shimmering golden dragon's repulse appeared over the surface of his golden dragon spear. Meanwhile, the power reciprocated to him by his golden dragon tyrant body abruptly erupted forth, and at the same time, his 5th golden soul ring also lit up as he unleashed his golden dragon vibrational explosion. His dragon's repulse and golden dragon vibrational explosion culminated in an extremely powerful combination that managed to even dispel the light of judgment unleashed by Yue's Hangyu in his martial soul true body form. At the same time, his golden dragon spear instantly conjured up countless projections that not only surged toward Yu Xinglan's star god sword, they also encompassed Yuan and Yui, Yue's Hangyu, and Yu Xinglan themselves. This was the current Tang Wulin. He was completely different from his past self. A crisp clang rang out, and Tang Wulin was surprised to discover that the star god sword before him had taken on an illusionary quality. In the next instant, it suddenly projected itself into his mind. Was her star god sword already capable of unleashing spiritual attacks by projecting the aura of its sword soul? Tang Wulin had faced a similar type of attack from Sima Jinkai in the past, but even though he was familiar with it, he was still quite surprised. It was undoubtedly the case that Yu Xinglan had grasped the true meaning of her sword soul. It was also right at this moment that a streak of light erupted out of thin air before hurtling toward Tang Wulin's neck. The streak of light had appeared far too abruptly, and even he had failed to sense it. His dragon's repulse had just erupted and was in the process of being withdrawn, so this attack had arrived right when his dragon's repulse was at its weakest. Thus, the dragon's repulse was silently parted, as if it had been torn apart by spatial fluctuations, and by the time Tang Wulin sensed the perilous situation he was in, the illusionary streak of light had already reached the back of his neck. It was Shishi. Tang Wulin instantly figured out who was attacking him. It turned out that the final attack was to come from Shishi rather than Yu Xinglan. They had dedicated all of their efforts to attacking him and completely disregarded Arahang and Sima Jinkai. His friends really were giving him special care. What a good group of friends they were. Shishi's attack was not going to be easy to withstand. At this point, his fury of masses still hadn't completely taken shape as he had been affected by the sword soul. Most importantly, Shishi's timing was simply far too immaculate. Yue's Hangyu's light of judgment was dispelled, but his holy sword was slashing through the air toward Tang Wulin. Meanwhile, Yuan and Yui had unleashed her second burst of divine cloud vortex fists after her first wave of attacks was devoured by Tang Wulin's golden dragon tyrant body. The attacks were coming in relentless waves with seamless transitions, and they only seemed to be becoming more powerful. In that instant, Tang Wulin instantly formed his judgment. He definitely wouldn't be able to last more than 3 waves of these combination attacks. He couldn't engage in a direct clash with his 6 opponents, so if he wanted to secure victory, he had to link up with his 2 teammates. Arahang and Sima Jinkai had just struggled free of the star wheel shackles and were just about to charge forward when Xu Shaoan exerted her control again. This time, it was dazzling starlight. Countless beams of starlight erupted forth, shining down upon Arahang, Sima Jinkai, and Tang Wulin, and immobilizing all 3 of them at once. In terms of control timing, even Tang Wulin didn't dare to proclaim that he was superior to Xu Shaoan. Xu Shaoan's control was far too accurate. The first beam of starlight struck Tang Wulin just as he was swiveling around and attempting to block Xu Xi's attack with his left hand. However, he was immobilized right at this critical juncture, and this split-second delay was enough to spell his defeat. Tang Wulin discovered that Xu Shaoan's control had become even more powerful than before. Not only had his body been immobilized, even his cognitive functions had stalled for an instant. Losing the ability to think in such a perilous situation was undoubtedly a massive disaster. Chapter 1206. Tang Wulin knew that he had still been too complacent and underestimated just how quickly his friends had grown. He shouldn't have charged out so quickly at the beginning and opened up so much distance between himself and his teammates, thereby giving Shrek 6 monsters a chance to isolate and surround him. Furthermore, his friends really did hold him in high regard. It was quite clear their plan from the very beginning was to take him out as quickly as possible before addressing Arahang and Sima Jinkai. The 6 of them had perfect synergy, and their attacks had clearly been bolstered by the effects of the bloodthirsty red beam buns, making even Tang Wulin struggle to defend himself against them. His golden dragon tyrant body had blocked the first wave of attacks, but this sneak attack from Xi was simply far too lethal. Even the spectating Wang Ye didn't think that Tang Wulin had any chance of turning the tables, but she had a very pleased smile on her face. If Tang Wulin were the only powerful member of Shrek's 7 monsters, then she would be very disappointed. No matter how powerful he was still only one person, and there was simply far too severe a limitation on the things that one person could do. However, if the rest of Shrek's 7 monsters were also forces to be reckoned with, then they would form a generation of powerful beings that would lead from the front in the revival of Shrek Academy and take it to the pinnacle of the entire continent again. As such, how could Wang Ye not be elated to see the dire situation that Tang Wulin was in? These kids had all grown up. However, right when everyone had thought that Tang Wulin was completely at the mercy of his friends, the sound of a violent heartbeat suddenly rang out. Lub dub, lub dub. As the thunderous heartbeat erupted, everything else seemed to fall silent. Xi, who was the closest to Tang Wulin and currently in the process of attacking him, clearly faltered momentarily. However, this heartbeat didn't come from Tang Wulin, it came from Arahang instead. The first one to be struck by dazzling starlight was Tang Wulin, followed by Sima Jinkai and Arahang, and right before he was struck, the sound of Arahang's heartbeat rang out. In a team battle, it was a huge disadvantage not to have a control system soul master. Arahang certainly wasn't a control system soul master, but the congenital secret method of the body sex that he had cultivated did possess certain control system abilities. As such, in the instant that he unleashed this control ability, the sound of his heavy heartbeat affected all of Shrek's 6 monsters. They had actually all witnessed Arahang using his heartbeat to disrupt his opponents during the Star Battle Net Interfederation competition, but seeing it on a television screen was completely different from facing it in person. On top of that, Arahang had progressed from the Soul Douluo level to the title Douluo stage since the competition, and he was now the true body Douluo. As a result, he improved even further in his congenital secret method and had truly reached a stage of full mastery. Hence, his raucous heartbeat made all of Shrek's 6 monsters' hearts skip a beat. Due to the insufficient blood circulation that resulted from this, their martial soul outputs were abruptly cut off, and the effect of dazzling starlight was forcibly nullified. A smile appeared on Tang Wulin's face. He wasn't fighting on his own, after all. Silver light flashed from his left hand, which he had reached behind himself, and another spear appeared in his grasp amid a flash of silver light. This was the divine Atlas spear of the Atlas Douluo, which was a weapon that had once reigned supreme over the entire continent, and a crisp clang rang out as the spear blocked Xu Xi's attack. At the same time, Tang Wulin's soul rings suddenly lit up, not his 5 golden soul rings, but his 7 soul rings instead, which he had instantly switched to. As opposed to unleashing his martial soul true body, the soul ring that lit up was his second one. Shrek's 6 monsters were all very familiar with Tang Wulin, and they naturally knew what his second soul skill was. Blue silver impaling array. How was that going to help him in a situation like this? Did he think that his blue silver impaling array would be enough to control everyone? At this moment, everyone had surrounded Tang Wulin, so his blue silver impaling array was indeed able to encompass all of his opponents. But this was still only his second soul skill, so what if it could encompass the entire battlefield? With the current powers of Shrek's 6 monsters, they had many ways to deal with such a weak control ability. However, just when they had thought that Tang Wulin was only making futile efforts, an astonishing scene ensued. A series of thick and powerful blue silver emperor vines erupted from the ground, but in the instant that they appeared, they turned into a bluish golden color amid bursts of dragon's roars. They were light bluish golden dragons that were surging out of the ground, and the front tip of each and every blue silver emperor vine had taken on the shape of a dragon's head. What was even more astonishing was that the vines were shimmering with golden light, and being struck by them was inevitable as the array had already encompassed a radius of over 100 meters. Everyone had unleashed abilities that they thought would be sufficient to ward off the effects of the blue silver impaling array, but they still fell under its control. Their bodies were momentarily immobilized, and even their bloodlines also seemed to have been dominated. All of their attacks were cut off almost in complete unison, and the pressure on Tang Wulin was instantly alleviated. A faint smile appeared on his face as he swept his golden dragon spear and divine atlas spear horizontally through the air at the same time. Yue's Hang Yu and Yuan and Yui were both sent flying by his spear, and he had already held back as they were his friends, but they were still launched into the distance like speeding arrows. At the same time, the divine atlas spear disappeared from his grasp, and he reached out behind himself with his left hand like lightning while stumping his right foot into the ground to unleash his golden dragon shakes the earth. 8 lush golden giant dragons erupted forth, and shockwaves proliferated in all directions, immobilizing Xu Shaoan again just as she was about to exert her control again. Even Yu Xinglin's Star God sword was affected, and she was cut off by Sima Jinkai, who rushed onto the scene to reinforce Tang Wulin. During a battle between soul masters, it was quite often the case that a single soul skill could completely turn the tide of the battle. This was why all soul masters pursued powerful soul skills in their cultivation. Tang Wulin's trio looked as if they were on the cusp of defeat just a moment ago, yet a simple blue silver impaling array was enough to instantly transform the situation. Yue's Hang Yu and Yuan and Yui, who were 2 of the main sources of offensive output, were sent flying, and no one could stop Tang Wulin now. He reached out with his left hand and grabbed the figure out of thin air, but as soon as she was pulled out into the open, he vanished in a wraith-like manner again. However, the situation on the battlefield was already set in stone. Tang Wulin smiled as he gently tapped his golden dragon spear onto Xu Shaoan's shoulder. Xu Shaoan's control was indeed extremely powerful, but once an enemy soul master got close to her, that would be the end of the role that she would play in the battle. Xu Lizzie was standing behind Xu Shaoan, and he immediately raised both of his hands up into the air in a gesture of surrender, while putting on a completely harmless expression. As a food system soul master, it wasn't his job to fight on the battlefield anyway. Meanwhile, Arahang had already rushed forward like a fierce gust of wind to hold back Yue's Hang Yu and Yuan and Yui, who were attempting to return to the battlefield. This battle was already as good as over. Tang Wulin exhaled as he turned to appraise the battle between Yu Xingling and Sima Jinkai. During this short time, the dragon-slaying saber and Star God sword had clashed several hundred times in rapid succession. Even though Yu Xingling was constantly backing away, she was still able to keep all of Sima Jinkai's attacks at bay, seemingly through nothing more than sheer willpower. All right, that's enough. Elder Long's voice rang out to announce a conclusion to this sparring match. The saber and sword clashed one final time before Yu Xingling performed a backward somersault and gently landed in the distance with a grim look on her face. Even though she and Sima Jinkai had only clashed for a very short time, she had been forced to bear immense pressure from him during this time. Chapter 1207. Sima Jinkai had become more powerful than before, to the extent that he seemed to be on a completely different level compared to his past self. Each and every attack unleashed by his dragon-slaying saber was accompanied by a piercing dragon's roar that swayed her mind and almost rendered her unable to summon her sword soul. During their brief battle, the dragon-slaying saber had displayed enormous power, and Yu Xingling felt as if her Star God sword were wailing with anguish with every clash, seemingly about to snap at any moment. This was something that she had never experienced during all of her previous battles. While it was indeed true that Sima Jinkai was now a titled Douluo, wasn't he still a little too strong? How had he become so much more powerful than before? Yu Xingling had already been working extremely hard in her cultivation, but she discovered that the gap between her and Sima Jinkai had only widened rather than shortened. This discovery dealt a rather heavy blow to her confidence. Everyone separated, and she also emerged out of thin air. Both sides were appraising one another with shock and incredulity in their eyes, and at this point, Long Yayu's smile had already faded. In reality, no one had even noticed that she had been smiling while spectating their battle. What were you all doing? You were fighting like a ragtag bunch of schoolkids. Is this the result of your cultivation? She was directing these words at everyone, and she certainly wasn't holding back. Tang Wulin's trio didn't feel too bad about this. After all, they were the victors, but Shrek 6 monsters all wore rather sour expressions. They had already gained the upper hand, but Arahang's violent heartbeat had disrupted the entire battle. She couldn't help but ask, when did your blue silver impaling array become so powerful, boss? Tang Wulin smiled, and replied, that wasn't my blue silver impaling array, it was a combination of my golden dragon king bloodline power and my blue silver emperor martial soul. I call it a blood soul fusion skill. The power of my blue silver emperor martial soul can be used to bolster my golden dragon king bloodline abilities, and vice versa. Indeed, what appeared to be a simple blue silver impaling array was actually a blood soul fusion skill that had been imbued with Tang Wulin's golden dragon king bloodline power, and it should be referred to as golden silver impaling array. The combination of the two created a product that was definitely not inferior to a soul fusion skill, and having been caught completely off guard by this, it was only natural that his friends would fall under its control. Do you think you were unlucky? If you were on a real battlefield, you'd all be dead already. Long Yayu said in a cold voice. Shrek 6 monsters' expressions darkened even further. In particular, Yingling hung her head in a shameful manner. She was the one who had devised their strategy, yet they had suffered such a terrible loss, so she had to take the brunt of the blame. Did you think that you'd be able to beat them just because you outnumber them? Why didn't you use your suits of battle armor right away despite the large cultivation rank disparity? Are your suits of two-word battle armor pre-ornaments? Long Yayu was delivering a scathing tirade without mincing any words. That's right. During that battle, none of Shrek 6 monsters had used their suits of battle armor. Prior to the commencement of the sparring match, it had been decided that they could use their suits of battle armor while Tang Wulin's trio couldn't. Arahang and Sima Jinkai were already three-word battle armor masters, so it would be far too unfair for them to be able to use their battle armor. However, the prideful Shrek 6 monsters refrained from using their battle armor right away, and that was what had resulted in their final, crushing defeat. If they had donned their suits of battle armor right away, Tang Wulin definitely wouldn't have been able to ward off their attacks so easily. Again, Long Yayu commanded before turning and making her way back toward the edge of the drill ground. Again. Tang Wulin turned to Arahang and Sima Jinkai. Arahang chuckled. Sure, I didn't even get a chance to warm up during that last battle. Hurry up and put on your suits of battle armor, little kitties. Otherwise, don't come crying to me when you lose. He then turned and made his way back to his starting position. Yue's Hangyu gritted his teeth in an enraged manner. Don't get cocky. Once we put on our battle armor, you'll have no chance. Sima Jinkai's gaze had been focused on Yingling this entire time, and he said, if you put on your suit of battle armor, perhaps I can consider using my full power. Yingling's complexion was a little purple, and even though she didn't say anything, she was clearly not in a good mood. The 6 monsters gathered together for a quick discussion while Tang Wulin's trio returned to their original positions. Even though they had won in the end, that was far from an easy victory. Shrek 6 monsters hadn't actually made any errors in their tactics, nor their teamwork. They had only lost as they weren't familiar enough with the abilities of Tang Wulin's trio. As such, both sides had learned a lot during that first match. In particular, Xu Xiaoyan's control abilities had left a very deep impression on both Arahang and Sima Jinkai. It was incredible to them that such a gentle and fragile-looking little girl could control them to such an absolute extent. Tang Wulin was still situated at the center with Arahang and Sima Jinkai on either side of him, and Shrek 6 monsters also adopted the same formation as before. Begin. Elder Long was just as concise and straightforward as ever. Thus, the second sparring match commenced. The last sparring match hadn't been very taxing to any of them. Everyone had already attained soul cores, which granted extremely fast soul power recovery, so the last battle didn't affect them much at all. Tang Wulin wasn't as reckless on this occasion. As he released his martial soul, he also activated his golden dragon body, and he held his golden dragon spear as he charged forward with Sima Jinkai and Arahang on either side of him, rather than behind him like last time. At the same time, his aura was constantly elevating during his advance. On the other end, Shrek 6 monsters had learned from their mistakes and released their suits of two-word armor in unison. All of their suits of battle armor had names that were related to their lovers, whom they were fighting alongside. They were Star Wisdom Yingling, Guardian Star Shu Lizzie, Dragon Knight Shi, Sky Twin Yuan and Yui, Star Universe Xu Xiaoyan, and Skyward Yue's Hangyu. Their suits of battle armor radiated dazzling light as they appeared over their bodies, and their auras instantly swelled to far greater heights than before. A 7-ring soul sage with a suit of two-word battle armor was comparable in power to a titled Douluo. They were missing their final 2 soul skills, so they couldn't be compared to actual titled Douluo, but Shrek 6 monsters were certainly not inferior to titled Douluos in battle. Tang Wulin's trio was immediately struck by a sense of vastly increased pressure, but all 3 of them only became more excited for it. All 3 of them were people who could only maximize their latent potential when facing powerful enemies, and in the face of the 6 two-word battle armor masters, their auras were also becoming more powerful. Lub dub, lub dub, lub dub. Arahang's heart thumped in a powerful manner, and his body also swelled to over 7 meters tall in the blink of an eye. A layer of crimson golden color appeared over his skin, and his aura felt comparable to that of their lord. Sima Jinkai had a sullen look in his eyes as his dragon-slaying saber shimmered like crippling water. There were projections of all types of giant dragons that were radiating evil auras behind him, and they were constantly flashing and overlapping, seemingly ready to truly project themselves into this world at any moment. The sharp blade of the dragon-slaying saber was radiating terrifying pressure, and with every forward stride he made was accompanied by the anguished wails of giant dragons. Tang Wulin was situated at the center of the trio with dragon's repulse shimmering around him and a platinum spear projection extending out of the front tip of his golden dragon spear. His spear soul reverberated within his mind, and his aura was elevating the most drastically among the trio. As his dragon's might was released, Shrek 6 monsters were all struck by immense bloodline pressure. A smile had reappeared on Long Yayu's face. Watching these exceptional young people fight was truly an enjoyable activity. How she wished that she was over 100 years younger so she could join them. But then again, when she was at their age, she didn't possess their current level of power. Chapter 1208. The more she looked at Tang Wulin, the more pleased she was with him. Of course, she was also very pleased with her precious disciple. Tang Wulin was looking more and more like a leader, and even powerful beings like Arahang and Sima Jinkai couldn't steal the limelight away from him. The 2 sides drew closer and closer, and Shrek 6 monsters were still adopting the same strategy of waiting on the spot. She vanished once again, unlike shimmered from Xu Xiaoyan's staff, looking as if she were about to spring into action at any moment. Complemented by her suit of two-word battle armor, it was as if she had become the starry sky herself with countless specks shining starlight around her, basking her staff in a brilliant radiance. She was the one who had the most attention directed toward her, and it was undoubtedly the case that she was going to be playing the most direct role in the outcome of this battle. The absolute nature of Xu Xiaoyan's abilities was simply far too fearsome, and even Sima Jinkai and Arahang were extremely wary of her. Right at this moment, Tang Wulin suddenly sprang into action. His entire body abruptly lunged forward by a huge step, and he stomped his foot onto the ground with a resounding boom. Shrek 6 monsters almost instantly reacted, and Xu Xiaoyan almost released a soul skill. However, Tang Wulin merely smiled after taking that step, and reassured, "Don't be scared. That was just a bluff." Peculiar looks appeared on Shrek 6 monsters' faces, but in the next instant, Tang Wulin's body suddenly took on an imaginary quality. Only Arahang and Sima Jinkai could see that he had abruptly flapped his golden dragon wings in an extremely discreet motion, and his third golden soul ring also lit up, indicating that he was unleashing his golden dragon takes flight. After charging ahead and being surrounded in the last battle, Shrek 6 monsters were all under the impression that surely he wouldn't make the same mistake again, and Tang Wulin was using this preconceived bias to his advantage. He had stomped forward as a bluff to affect the mental states of Shrek 6 monsters, then abruptly charged onward while they were still yet to recover. Not only was this an eruption of power, a psychological warfare tactic had also been used. As such, as his body rushed forward, Shrek 6 monsters were all slightly slow to react. Right at this moment, Tang Wulin instantly activated his golden dragon tyrant body. On top of that, his dragon's repulse also erupted in a frenzy. He was combining his dragon's repulse and golden dragon vibrational explosion again, and on this occasion, he had unleashed both of them in the same instant. Xu Xiaoyan reacted very quickly as her 6th soul ring flashed, and the light barrier that had thwarted Tang Wulin during the last battle appeared once again. This light barrier was known as absolute star barrier, and even though it could only last for an instant, it possessed extremely potent defensive power. Furthermore, it was also an absolute ability, and it was able to ward off all energy, spiritual, or physical attacks. Tang Wulin had fallen victim to the effect of this barrier during the last battle, and now that Xu Xiaoyan had donned her suit of two-word battle armor, she was able to maintain her absolute star barrier for a split second longer. However, the events that unfolded next came as quite a surprise to her. Tang Wulin's full frontal charge suddenly stopped cold just as he was about to crash into the absolute star barrier, and only his devastating dragon's repulse surged into it. Not only that, but his golden dragon spear suddenly vanished, and in the next instant, he summoned his gold and silver impaling array again. A vast expanse of vines immediately erupted forth, and Tang Wulin had intentionally manufactured this situation to try and turn the tables by exerting control over Xu Xiaoan instead. Even though the absolute star barrier managed to block the first barrage of the gold and silver impaling array, there was no end to Tang Wulin's vines. Yet Xu Xiaoan's absolute star barrier could only last for an instant. Once the absolute star barrier vanished, the gold and silver impaling array would exert control in reverse, and even with their suits of two-word battle armor equipped, Shrek 6 monsters would still be affected by the array, thereby ruining their formation. After grasping Xu Xiaoan's abilities, Tang Wulin immediately devised a plan to target her. However, Shrek 6 monsters were also extremely seasoned combatants. They didn't choose to retreat, as retreating at a time like this would allow Araheng and Sima Jinkai to catch up with Tang Wulin, which would force them completely onto the back foot. As such, starlight flashed from Xu Xiaoan's staff, and a star wheel shackle appeared beneath Tang Wulin's feet. Only by controlling Tang Wulin first could she prevent his control ability from taking effect. This was a clash of pure control abilities. All of a sudden, a massive purple flower appeared behind Tang Wulin. It was none other than the beautiful silk tulip, and it immediately unleashed its devouring heaven and earth. The fact that he was unleashing devouring heaven and earth when he was situated so close to his opponents was a clear indication of how confident he was. The gold and silver impaling array was cut off, and the devouring heaven and earth had been unleashed by the beautiful silk tulip, so even though he had been controlled, it didn't interfere with the output of the soul skill. The gold and silver impaling array was cut off, and the absolute star barrier also vanished. The two sides were right in front of one another, and Tang Wulin was about to be struck by a torrential barrage of attacks. However, right at this moment, his body suddenly flew backward. A blue silver emperor vine was stretched taut on the ground, and everyone had failed to notice that Tang Wulin had left behind a blue silver emperor prior to commencing his forward charge. Furthermore, the other end of the vine was being held by Araheng, and he forcibly dragged Tang Wulin back right as devouring heaven and earth was unleashed. Thus, everyone's attacks fell upon nothing but empty air, which made for quite a jarring experience. In particular, Yue Chengyu had even unleashed his martial soul true body, yet the dazzling light unleashed by his holy sword had completely failed to strike its target. Tang Wulin's control had been exquisitely implemented, and he had essentially tricked Xu Xiaoan into prematurely using her absolute star barrier. Tang Wulin was confident that even Xu Xiaoan wouldn't be able to use such an insane control ability in quick succession. There had to be some cooldown time required before she could use it again. Shrek 6 monsters had all donned their suits of battle armor, but they had also just eaten bloodthirsty red bean buns, which would tax their bodies over time, so he wasn't in a hurry at all. On top of that, even though he had been struck by a star wheel shackle, it didn't affect his devouring heaven and earth at all, and his aura continued to swell as the energy particles in the air surged toward him in a frenzy. By the time the three of them were reunited, they were only around 50 meters away from Shrek 6 monsters. Araheng stepped forward and rushed directly toward them, while Sima Jinkai brandished his dragon-slaying saber and charged toward Yu Xinglan with a fearsome aura radiating from his body. This was going to be a direct 3-on-6 clash. To put it more accurately, it was 3-on-5 as she was still nowhere to be seen. Was a direct clash about to ensue? Among Shrek 6 monsters, Yuan and Yui's body abruptly swelled in size as she unleashed all of her enhancement soul skills, including Titan Strength and Diamond Titan, thereby resulting in a sharp spike in her aura. Her divine cloud vortex fists had been developed based on her air cannon soul skill, and with the enhancements from her Titan Giant 8 martial soul, the power of her divine cloud vortex fists naturally increased drastically. Boom. The first two clashes were Yuan and Yui and Araheng. A violent boom erupted, and Yuan and Yui was evenly matched with Araheng, able to completely hold her ground without even taking half a backward step. Even though this had only been achieved through the enhancements of her battle armor, it was still sufficient testament to how powerful she currently was. Her divine cloud vortex fists had improved again, to the extent that she was able to match even Araheng in their initial clash. Tang Wulin was quite surprised to see this. Yuan and Yui and Yu Xinglan were only below him in power among Shrek 7 monsters, and both of them possessed extremely powerful combat prowess. Furthermore, they were developing just as quickly as he was, but even so, Tang Wulin was stunned by how powerful this punch from Yuan was. Wasn't her body supposed to have been weakened to a certain extent by the bloodthirsty red bean bun she had consumed? Araheng immediately burst into hearty laughter. Nice. Again. He swung his fist toward Yuan and Yui as he spoke, and on this occasion, he wasn't holding back in the slightest. Pronounced veins appeared all over his body, and crimson golden light erupted all around him. After taking a deep breath, Yuan and Yui's body swelled once again, and the air currents around her became more violent, forming a tornado that instantly compressed itself onto her fist. The two clashed again, and Araheng felt as if he had punched a deep-sea vortex. The rapid rotational force was stripping away his power, and there was an indescribably violent current at the core of the vortex that was tearing at him in a frenzy. What a powerful technique. In contrast, Yuan and Yui felt as if Araheng's attack were bearing down upon her like a mountain. Regardless of how much her divine cloud vortex fists tried to whittle down his power, it seemed that he wasn't being weakened in the slightest. Boom. During the second clash, Yuan and Yui fell short of the mark. Even with the enhancements from her battle armor, her powers were still significantly inferior to those of the body Douluo, who was the only one in the current generation of the body sect to have successfully cultivated the congenital secret method. Chapter 1209. Yuan and Yui was forced to stumble back 3 steps in succession, while Araheng remained standing on the spot. However, his eyes were filled with surprise and elation. Tang Wulin had already revealed to him that Yuan and Yui was a woman, and it was simply astounding to him that a woman could keep up with him in a direct clash of strength. Meanwhile, Sima Jinkai was just as elated as he was. His dragon-slaying saber came crashing downward, and it was met by what appeared to be a bright star. The star was instantly shattered, but the dragon-slaying saber was also repelled, and they appeared to be evenly matched as well. With the enhancements from her suit of battle armor, Yu Xinglan's aura swelled drastically, and her star god sword had become far more stable than before. Her sword soul flourished, and it was exploiting every single chink in Sima Jinkai's defense while crashing down like a devastating meteor shower. The saber and sword clashed, and Yu Xinglan was able to hold off Sima Jinkai on her own. The two women were dealing with the two title Douluos, so Yue Chengyu was naturally left to face Tang Wulin. Yue Chengyu had suffered the most from the jarring effect of his attack failing to strike Tang Wulin, and now that Tang Wulin was rushing toward him, he immediately sent a pillar of light of judgment crashing down upon him. As Tang Wulin's golden dragon tyrant body absorbed the energy from the light of judgment, his golden dragon spear was thrust forward like lightning, and it was none other than the first spear technique that old Tang had taught him, Fury of the Masses. Countless spear projections erupted forth before converging and hurtling toward Yue Chengyu. Yue Chengyu's swordsmanship was far inferior to that of Yu Xinglan, as his forte lay in his light attribute powers. As such, in the face of the Fury of the Masses unleashed by Tang Wulin's golden dragon spear, his holy sword immediately began to struggle to keep up. He was being enhanced by the 12-winged angel behind him and his suit of two-word battle armor, but Tang Wulin was also being bolstered by his devouring heaven and earth and golden dragon king powers, and Yue Chengyu had been forced firmly onto the back foot. He was about to stumble back into Yu Xinglan at any moment now, and even though Tang Wulin's attacks appeared to be quite ferocious, he wasn't actually using his full power. Shishi's disappearance was very abnormal, especially because he still hadn't attacked yet. He was very opportunistic in battle and could appear at any moment. Furthermore, Xu Xiaoan had also remained inactive for a long while, ever since she had unleashed her star wheel shackle and absolute star barrier. With her current powers as a 7-ring soul sage, that was also quite bizarre. However, due to the smokescreen created by Yue Chengyu's wings and the violent energy surging through the air, Tang Wulin had no idea what Xu Xiaoan was doing, which was why he was feeling quite wary. It could be said that Tang Wulin's trio had already gained a considerable advantage in this battle. This was technically a 3-on-6 battle, but in reality, only 4 of Shrek 6 monsters possessed powerful offensive prowess. The remaining 2 consisted of a control system soul master and a food system soul master, neither of whom could directly participate in the battle. Hence, as soon as one of Araheng or Sima Jinkai defeated their opponent, this battle was a good as over. However, Tang Wulin knew his friends very well, and even though the tactics he'd employed at the beginning of the battle had led to this situation, they shouldn't be this easy to overwhelm. All of them had improved significantly during their respective military stints, and from the first battle, it was quite apparent that they still had great teamwork and synergy. Hence, as he was dominating Yue Zhengyu, he was also waiting for Xu Shaoan and Shi Shi to strike. If one of them were to be thwarted by him, then the battle really was as good as over. Yue Zhengyu was truly pulling out all the stops to oppose the fury of the masses. His holy sword was flashing violently, and in the face of the insanely sharp golden dragon spear, he felt as if his sword were about to shatter at any moment. He really was extremely powerful. If he had unleashed such a fearsome assault from the outset of their one-on-one sparring match, he may not even have been able to unleash his holy fusion technique. However, he was confident that they would be able to secure the final victory. Hee. A faint chuckle suddenly sounded beside Tang Wulin's ears, and he immediately swung his right arm through the air without any hesitation. His golden dragon spear was transferred into his left hand, and he used his fury of the masses again, completely encompassing Yue Zhengyu within his attack. Even if Xu Shaoan were to unleash her control abilities now, there still wouldn't be many holes in his defense for Yue Zhengyu to exploit. At the same time, Tang Wulin's right hand transformed into his golden dragon dread claws. To put it more accurately, this attack was his golden dragon annihilation claws. He was waiting for Shi Shi to strike, and that chuckle had come from none other than Shi Shi. In that instant, he was able to clearly gauge Shi Shi's location through his spiritual power, but as soon as he swept his claws through the air, the surrounding space instantly twisted and warped violently. The light in the surrounding area also dimmed, and the drill ground vanished, only to be replaced by a starry sky. Tang Wulin's pupils abruptly contracted, and his golden dragon annihilation claws naturally fell upon nothing. Within this boundless space, no matter how fearsome his golden dragon annihilation claws, there was no way he could unleash their full power. What was going on? After a brief moment of surprise, Tang Wulin was immediately struck by an immense sense of pressure. In the next instant, he was able to answer his own question. This was a domain. Not long ago, he had personally experienced light dark Douluo along Ye's domain, and the space that he was currently in was very similar in nature to a domain. He finally understood why Xu Shaoan had remained inactive after unleashing two of her soul skills. She was biding her time to prepare a trump card. This domain was very likely her martial soul true body, but she most likely required some time before she could unleash it, and everyone else's job was simply to buy her the time that she needed. In that instant, Tang Wulin understood everything, and he was immediately filled with elation. Even though he was currently falling victim to this insanely powerful control ability, it was most definitely going to be an extremely valuable asset when they faced other enemies in real battles in the future. What he was facing now was something that their collective enemies were going to have to face in the future. How could he not be elated by this thought? Right at this moment, a burst of mountainous pressure suddenly appeared off to the side before crashing directly toward him. Yuan and Yui seemed to have emerged out of a star and was unleashing a barrage of divine cloud vortex fists toward him. It was most likely the case that Sima Jinkai and Arahang had been disoriented by this domain, so Shrek 6 monsters were taking this opportunity to attack him. Tang Wulin instantly realized what his friend's tactics were, and a wry smile appeared on his face. They really were giving him a lot of special care. Even at a time like this, they were determined to eliminate him first. Despite the dire situation that he had been plunged into, it was at times like this that Tang Wulin's strong willpower really shone through. He took a deep breath before thrusting his golden dragon spear forward, and a piercing spear projection flashed as it opposed the divine cloud vortex fists. At the same time, a burst of devastating sword intent descended from above like a shooting star. It was none other than New Zealand's star god sword. Tang Wulin flicked his left wrist, and the divine Alice spear appeared in his grasp, radiating powerful spear intent. With his immense strength, he was able to withstand New Zealand's attack, but she had already attained a very high level of mastery over her sword soul, so it was attacking not just his body, but also his mind. The combination attacks unleashed by Yu Xinglan and Yuan and Yui were giving Tang Wulin quite a hard time. If this were a fair battle, then Tang Wulin wouldn't be having much trouble in this situation. However, his friends had all donned their suits of two-word battle armor, but he was unable to release his own suit of battle armor, so he was naturally at a huge disadvantage. Haha. Let's see how you dig yourself out of this hole, boss. Yue Zhengyu descended from the sky, and a dazzling pillar of light of judgment crashed heavily down onto his body. Tang Wulin had a way to nullify this light of judgment, but he still found it to be a very annoying attack, simply because there was no way to evade these light speed attacks. He could only take the attacks head on, but doing so would inevitably require expenditure of soul power. Chapter 1210. He was forced to use his golden dragon tyrant body again, but thankfully, he was able to absorb energy through his devouring heaven and earth. Thus, even though Tang Wulin was being forced back by his three friends, he was able to just barely withstand their attacks. During this brief clash, he had also formed a series of judgments. The first thing that he could be sure of was that after unleashing this domain like soul skill, Xu Shaoan was unable to exert further control, so he still had a chance. Secondly, Arahang and Sima Jinkai had most likely completely lost their way, and he had no idea where they were. This was the main issue. Without any allies, he had no chance against his friends, all of whom had donned their suits of battle armor. However, there was nothing he could do before he broke through this domain. Tang Wulin was confident that even in her martial soul true body form and the assistance from Shu Lizi's steamed buns, Xu Shaoan shouldn't be able to maintain this domain for too long. After all, this was a domain that had befuddled two titled Douluos, and Xu Shaoan was still only a soul sage. Even so, Tang Wulin was still very happy for her. She already possessed such a powerful soul skill at her current cultivation rank. How formidable would her domain become once she became a titled Douluo? A faint smile appeared on Tang Wulin's face, and even though he was having a very hard time, he was in a very good mood. It was exactly due to the arduous situation that he was in that his latent potential had completely been brought to the fore. His dragon core was beating violently, and his heart was beating to the exact same rhythm. There was no way that Tang Wulin's soul power could exceed that of his three opponents, but in terms of strength, even the three of them combined were no match for him. In this situation, his insane strength played an extremely important role, and that, in conjunction with his understanding of his spear soul, allowed him to just barely withstand everyone's ferocious attacks while wielding his dual spears. He still had trump cards up his sleeve, including his two other soul spirits. The Tyrant Dragon and Gold Song could keep everyone occupied for some time, and what he had to do now was stall as much as possible. Once the domain faded, Xu Shaoan would undoubtedly be severely debilitated, and when that time came, the victory would still belong to them. However, right at this moment, a bone-chilling aura suddenly appeared behind him, and Shi Shi's voice rang out again. Have a taste of the power of the space-time dragon. A sharp and illusionary burst of power tore through Tang Wulin's dragon's repulse again, and much to his surprise, he discovered that Shi Shi's attack was completely different compared to before. Even his dragon's repulse had been affected by spatial fluctuations, but he couldn't sense any spatial elements emanating from Shi Shi's body. What kind of ability was this? Even though he had been progressing rapidly of late, he was still struggling in this one-on-four battle. One had to realize that these weren't just any four opponents. They were four of Shrek's 7 monsters. No matter how powerful Tang Wulin was, it was inevitable that he would struggle to keep up against four opponents of this caliber. Boom. His dragon's repulse surged forth along with the power of his golden dragon vibrational explosion in an attempt to force Shi Shi's attack away, and the sharp aura did indeed falter momentarily, but it was only for an instant before it continued to penetrate. Shrek's 7 monsters had always had brilliant teamwork, and Shi Shi wasn't speaking as he unleashed his sneak attack against Tang Wulin just to gloat. Instead, he was giving his friends a verbal signal, so right as he attacked, Yuan and Yu Xinglan, and Yue Zhengyu also sprang into action in unison. Brilliant starlight erupted from Yu Xinglan's body, and the specks of light on her star wisdom battle armor linked up with one another. In that instant, it was as if she had transformed into a primordial divine sword and was slashing toward Tang Wulin with unrivaled power. This was her 7th soul skill, Star God Sword True Body. At the same time, Yuan and Yui's body swelled drastically in size as she fully adopted her beast form. Her fists slashed out in rapid succession, and one giant vortex after another erupted forth to encompass Tang Wulin's body. This was also her 7th soul skill, Titan Giant Ape True Body. Meanwhile, the 12-winged angel projection behind Yue Zhengyu abruptly became clearer, and his 7th soul ring lit up. The 4 pairs of wings on his back expanded and elongated in unison, and his entire body seemed to have been coated in gold. 7th soul skill, Holy Angel True Body. The 3 Assault System Soul Masters had unveiled their martial soul true bodies in unison to attack Tang Wulin from the front, and their sole objective was to keep him from being able to deal with Shi Shi's attack from behind. It was undoubtedly the case that Shi Shi was supposed to deliver the decisive blow. Xu Shaoan had used her powerful domain ability to control the battlefield and temporarily rid Arahang and Sima Jinkai of the ability to help Tang Wulin, following which all of Shrek's 6 monsters pulled together their powers to take him out first. Tang Wulin was the weakest of the trio in terms of cultivation rank, but Shrek's 6 monsters were all his closest friends, and they were more than aware of what he was capable of. He was a man who regularly created miracles, themselves and made the impossible possible. Hence, they had to take him out first before dealing with the other two. That was the strategy that the 6 monsters had decided on from the very beginning, and it appeared that this strategy was about to bear fruit. Tang Wolin wore an expression of fury and indignation on his face. Did they really have to go this far? They were all wearing suits of 2-word battle armor, and they were ganging up on him 4-on-1. This was way too unfair. Even with all of his powers and abilities, he was struck by a sense of powerlessness, and the last time he had felt this level of pressure was when he had faced Bear Lord. However, just as his friends had predicted, the more pressure that was exerted on Tang Wolin, the more of his latent potential he would be able to draw upon. On this occasion, he didn't use his gold and silver impaling array. In the face of his friends, who had all unleashed their martial soul true bodies and donned their suits of 2-word battle armor, he unleashed his most powerful abilities without any hesitation. A loud dragon's roar erupted from his body, and his 7th soul ring lit up as he released his blue emperor true body. Countless vines erupted from his body in a frenzy, and each vine was like a giant dragon that was sweeping toward his 4 oncoming friends. Tang Wolin could clearly sense that the blue silver emperor vines surging toward Shishi were constantly being snapped and broken. However, he also knew that this was unavoidable, so he managed to constantly remain calm and collected. Through the fusion of his blue silver emperor and golden dragon king bloodline, he was retaliating and assessing the powers of his friends. The most fearsome aspect of one's martial soul true body was its ability to enhance the power of all of their soul skills. As such, the 6 monsters weren't in their most powerful forms after adopting their martial soul true bodies. They were at their most powerful when they unleashed their other soul skills through their martial soul true bodies. This was exemplified by how Yue Tengyu's holy fusion technique had once destroyed Tang Wolin's blue emperor dragon shocks the heavens. As such, as soon as Tang Wolin adopted his blue emperor true body form, brilliant golden light radiated forth, and he pointed his golden dragon spear forward as an unrivaled aura of dominance that threatened to conquer the entire world abruptly erupted from his body. Path of regal domination. Golden light erupted forth and extended forward with Yuan and Yui right in its path. The vortexes formed by her divine cloud vortex fists were all vanquished by the path of regal domination, and the golden light hurtled directly toward her massive body at an incredible speed. All soul sages possessed extremely powerful abilities and sensory skills, and Yuan and Yui was no exception to this. She was immediately able to sense the huge threat that the golden light posed to her, and her heart jolted with shock as she took evasive measures. Her instantaneous judgment was that there was no better way for her to deal with this attack than to evade it, so she could only try to attack Tang Wolin from the side. Shishi's attack finally struck Tang Wolin from behind, but in that instant, he felt as if he had struck a golden illusion. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.